Those of you that are listening, for your information on Toppy Chat, what you put in there is private. Not the whole group is not going to see it. And then Joe will take it and summarize it and give it to the teams that you are giving input to. So you can say whatever you want. It will only go to the team. Okay, so we're on our third team already. This team is Women in Leadership. And their challenge focuses on moving us toward the day when Crew is characterized as an organization where women in all levels of leadership feel valued and needed and flourishing as leaders. I, for one, am excited about that. And, you guys want to introduce your coaches when you get up there? Because you've got several. So, okay, we'll let you take off with it. Women in Leadership.
I've had some pretty negative experiences as a staff woman. I think that women experience discrimination in the secular world as well as ours at times. But what's even more painful in the Crew world is that the Bible is used to create this barrier for women to grow and lead. I'm under the impression that it's okay for men to push back on ideas, but when women do, they face a lot of backlash since they are not representing the stereotypical, sweet, sensitive female. Young women notice how more experienced women are treated.
My specific team doesn't allow women to MC by herself, but men can, or lead the worship band. It was very sad and discouraging that it was assumed when I came on staff that I would not be engaged in the ministry because I have children.
I don't want to be the side dish to the entree.
A big part of my experience leading summer missions has been trying to figure out which part of a male team leader's job he's not interested in and how I need to compensate for that.
As a female team leader, I almost always have to ask to be included in informal modes of communication. It's exhausting to do over and over again.
If you're single on staff, you get overworked because you're seen as more emotionally available and have a larger capacity than marrieds or those with kids. If you get married on staff, then you're viewed with an expiration date until you have a baby.
I was being referenced to be a team leader, but was told not to do it once the regional staff found out I was pregnant. The counsel was that I could still do the job without the title, which I did for over a decade. But it also meant I never had a coach or anyone to train me or any sort of mentorship. It's a fight to believe people in crew care about me.
When I'm leading, it seems to be only in a position where men are not available or that they do not want. When I co-lead with a man, I'm not really considered a leader. I'm just a backup for when the man cannot be present or doesn't want to do something. I'm often seen as the secretary to the male leader rather than his colleague.
It has hurt to be marginalized.
I was told I made other moms look bad because of my contributions.
A woman's name came up for a leadership opportunity, but the men on my team discounted her because she'd recently had a tragedy in her life, and they thought she would be too emotional to do the job.
I'm in the process of switching to a different ministry because I felt so unheard and undervalued on my team.
I guess I wonder, will anything actually change? I've been asked point blank by other staff, do I feel hopeful about women and ethnic minorities? I sometimes don't know what to say. Am I hopeful? Do I think change can happen fast enough?
When Crew began 67 years ago, women had vastly different experiences on staff. In 1951, even though it was countercultural of the times, especially in evangelical community, Bill and Vonette Bright founded Campus Crusade for Christ together. And as you know, years before Bill Bright spoke of his vision to win the campus in order to win the world tomorrow, God shaped his theological understanding and ministry philosophy through the spiritual leadership of a woman, Dr. Henrietta Mears. We are not lacking for additional examples of powerful, spirit-filled, strong women in Crew's early history. Mae Bailey did not let her experiences as a single woman hold her back from starting family life out of concern for the marriages of staff couples. And Judy Douglas launched Worldwide Challenge as a way to communicate the work that God was doing around the world to the broader staff family and the body of Christ. Women have been integral to the mission of Crew ever since the beginning. Fast forward to 2018. In the video we just watched, many women's experiences on staff today are in stark contrast to those early years of Crew. The majority of women in leadership describe their experiences as mixed, meaning many have walked a painful and challenging road while engaging in enjoyable leadership roles. Without doubt, most of the women that we interviewed and responded to our survey were incredibly grateful. They were grateful for the opportunity they had to serve God through the ministry of Crew. And we heard a number of bright spots, spots where women were pushing past traditional barriers and receiving the development and coaching they had hoped for and longed for. But, and isn't there always a but from the interviews with stakeholders, executives, national leaders, and of course, these thousands of comments from our survey, one thing is clear. Staff women today are praying, they're hoping, and they're waiting. They're waiting for a new season of Crew. A season where there's a healthy culture for women in leadership to thrive.
Our challenge, commissioned by the USLDHR and the Jesus Film Project, was to help create a vibrant leadership culture for women that empowers and develops them to lead within all U.S. ministries. Our hope, our vision of the outcome of this project is that Crew would be characterized as an organization where women at all levels of leadership feel valued and needed, flourishing as leaders. We envision a future in which intention and energy and resources would be devoted to overcoming obstacles that would keep women from fully contributing to the mission. The future would have our best leaders working together, honoring diverse perspectives in order to maximize our outcome and our impact in bringing the gospel to everyone, everywhere. This project has the opportunity to be one of the single greatest impacts for the future of our organization and has direct implications for over 4,300 U.S. staff women, as well as the fruitfulness of our ministry results. It's not just about our staff women thriving, even though that is significant in and of itself. The effects of our staff women thriving and contributing to their fullest desire and capacity also critically impacts our fruitfulness and ministry effectiveness. For all intents and purposes, this issue is ultimately about stewarding the resources that God has entrusted to us, the thousands of women already on mission. And we believe there is a new level of fruitfulness ahead as we faithfully steward the talents and leadership gifts of all of our staff. In fact, 2 out of 3 women surveyed agree that improving Crew's culture for women should be one of the top priorities for Crew to accomplish its mission. The overwhelming response to our survey of over 3,000 comments demonstrates that we struck a chord with our staff. Please hear our heart. We celebrate the work that has been done in the past to lay the foundation for women thriving in leadership, yet more action is needed. We know that women in leadership is not a new topic for you. In fact, we are confident and believe that many of you have a deep and passionate interest to see Crew characterized as an organization where women at all levels of leadership feel valued and needed. Because of this, we want to share with you what our research has uncovered that could shed new light on one of the most strategic opportunities to move toward this vision.
Our research and proposal focus on staff women who want to lead. That's key, staff women who want to lead. Although we anticipate a more attractive leadership culture overall might result in more staff women desiring to explore greater leadership opportunities. We hope a domino effect will come. We found that question number 18 on our survey yielded fascinating results. 38% of the women we surveyed agree or strongly agree in that in the next year or 2 they would like to take on a position in Crew with more responsibility or scope. To better understand their sentiment and experience, we actually narrowed that data even farther and studied the women who strongly agree with question number 18. 1 in 8 women on staff who took our survey strongly agree that they would like to take on a position with more responsibility, and what we have called greater leadership. This is good news. By analyzing our entire survey data through their perspectives, through their eyes and their experiences, we began to see how they greatly differ from other staff women, especially those who actually do not hold a formal leadership role nor desire to have one. The woman who strongly desires to lead within Crew in the near future or grow in her leadership, we have nicknamed her the Q18 woman. She became our focus in all of our solutions and in this entire proposal. Our research supports that women who are national executives and female stakeholders, everyone that we interviewed, they actually have great similarities to the Q18 woman. Let's meet her. 1 in 3 is single. 1 in 3 has dependent children at home. 1 in 3 is over 40. That means 2 in 3 are under 40. 1 in 4 is from non-dominant culture. Over double the number that are currently on staff desire to grow in their leadership. Understanding the Q18 woman was key, and we wanted to look at the obstacles that she faces specifically as she encounters her life on staff. We want to make more leadership roles available for her, and we want to help her step into those leadership roles as her career goes on. And then lastly, we want to ensure that the environment around her actually allows her to thrive. In our survey, women who expressed a strong desire to lead also expressed greater pain in their staff journey as compared to women who don't desire to lead. Ironically, the leading indicator of which women experience the most frustration on staff were the very ones who most desire to lead. In fact, the more a woman wants to lead, the harder her journey with crew. And conversely, the less a woman wants to lead, the more positive her experience on staff. Let's look at what the Q18 women experience. 61% have felt invisible, or as if they have fallen through the cracks. 78% feel they have to prove they have something valuable to offer. 58% believe assumptions have been made about their capacity. 61% have felt misunderstood by male coworkers. 51% have felt they had to fight to lead within crew. And 38% don't even really know if there's a place for them in crew. And I'd like to ask a favor of you. If you're sitting in the back half of the room, those 6 tables, would you guys stand for me? If all of us in this room are Q18 women, women who want to lead in crew, women who are longing to make a difference for the kingdom, those of you who are standing right there represent women who currently today are wondering if they should stay on staff, wondering if there's a place for them in crew. A whopping 54% of Q18 women, again, our future leaders, have recently considered leaving crew because they think their opportunities for growth and professional development are limited. Retaining and promoting Q18 women, particularly those who are considering leaving, over half, must be essential for the future of our organization. Thank you, you can take a seat. In addition to the obstacles that Q18 women experiences, there is a noticeable trend. 76% of our youngest staff strongly support shared leadership. And the way that's defined is men and women can lead alongside each other as team leaders, national directors, or executives. The top bar there represents our youngest staff, where the bottom bar represents our oldest staff. Only 43% of our oldest staff strongly support shared leadership. But here's what we want you to see, the red on this graph. The red says it all. And that is our main point, is that because the trend of the next generation is clear, will we create the pathways necessary to embrace the future, not the past, and be relevant to the next generation of college students and staff? The gap between the past and the future is already wide, and the urgency for change is today. Our hope is that this proposal and the effects of it and everything that comes from it would stop the trend that our potential leaders are leavers.
This begs the question, what is the experience of the Q18 woman in the environment of crew? Before we get to our solutions, we'd like you to consider the obstacles that the Q18 woman experiences as she seeks to lead in our current environment. So let's take a journey with her. She looks around, and she doesn't notice a lot of women in high levels in the organization. And there doesn't seem to be a holistic priority to change that. She might even take herself out of the running and leave staff simply because of that reality. This corresponds with our first obstacle, low organizational will and communication about women and leadership. If the Q18 woman continues, she might wonder, would I even be allowed to fully lead? If I got a position, would my leadership be respected? Would I be empowered? Imagine doing your job well, getting the results you were responsible for, only to hear in your 360 reviews that you were too emotional, too difficult to work with, or too opinionated because you were a woman. This is an example of a kind of unconscious bias that allows the enemy to divide and demoralize when it is not addressed and openly discussed. This illustrates our second organizational obstacle, which is that we have a lack of specialized training for a healthy work culture between men and women. Now, our Q18 woman has ambition and drive and continues over time to gain more responsibility and leadership. She is then likely to end up asking, where do I go for help, a mentor? There doesn't seem to be many other women around. Is there anyone that can help set me in the right direction? Both women currently in leadership and those desiring to lead expressed confusion about knowing how to uniquely grow in the competencies that would qualify them for positions with more responsibility. This, coupled with a sense of isolation and a highly relational culture for hiring and promotion, led us to identify our third obstacle, which is minimal access to leadership development and organizational networks for female staff leaders. Finally, when and if the Q18 woman can overcome each of these challenges, she may look around in confusion about why she is subject to such different policies than her male peers. She sees that most of the women she knows tend to end up on one end of the spectrum or the other, either overworked or under-challenged. We seek to address this obstacle as well, which is that the current LDHR policies and processes communicate a lack of value to women. So let's take a look at our research and how these obstacles influenced our recommendations.
I trust that we've established a solid foundation upon which to build out our solutions. Our solution categories correspond to each of our 4 obstacles. They suggest a multifaceted change process. Though our solutions focus on women who desire to lead, we believe they will also impact all of our staff women, as well as our effectiveness in getting to everyone everywhere. Our 4 solution categories: signal the priorities, understand the barriers, connect the network, equalize the environment. When we consider signaling the priority, we think of 2 words from our leaders: message and model. In sending an ongoing messaging affirming female leaders, there's great news. The people in this room, the people that we interviewed in our first round of research, 60 of them expressed a resonating desire that women would be developed, empowered, and given opportunity. That brings great hope. You want this. However, we also discovered that our staff generally have a different perception from what we heard expressed from our leaders. In particular, among the Q18 women, the one most likely to lead, 78% do not believe equal opportunity for women is a high priority among executives. In addition, we received over 100 comments asking that leadership give more clarity to areas where our practice can be confusing, ambiguous, and even inconsistent. Thus, we are asking leadership to demonstrate not just the desire, but the will to communicate affirmation of and empowerment for women to lead, that they have inherent worth, support for their unique contributions and gifts, and their ability to lead at all levels. The second implementation step under signal of priority is to model leadership teams to be 30% women. When we talk about leaders, we're defining leaders as having the decision-making authority over priority, people, and finances. This isn't about quotas, rather it's about bringing the best leaders to the table. External research has shown that 30% is the tipping point. It's the critical mass that yields the best results. Our current reality, by our estimates, crew executive teams are comprised of about 21% women. We're asking, in essence, that we go from 1 to 5 to 1 to 3 over the next couple years. One bright spot that Mark talked about relative to our own SLI cohort, he said, I've noticed a significant difference with our dynamic in SLI having 50% women in the room for the first time. It's been powerful. Men have slowed down. They've listened better. They've thought better. The ratio is really important because of the dynamic it creates in the leadership community. Our second solution category is to understand the barriers. These solutions speak to our culture, having a thriving culture that attracts and cultivates the best female leaders. We've already heard from our esteemed colleagues with Oneness and Diversity about unconscious bias training. We join them in calling for unconscious bias training for all. When we talk about bias, we're talking whether unconscious or deliberate, it's a powerful force, keeping women and underrepresented groups marginalized. It shapes how we view men's and women's roles and their abilities. Overall, in our research, we heard a very, very positive experience overall from our staff women, but all of them had a story to tell, or 2, or 3, or 4. Exposure to this type of training, alignment from Steve, what Tara's working on with her training, we believe this will engage us in conversation and move us forward. Second area of this category has to do with providing healthy frameworks for healthy teams. This essentially has to do with relationships. We look at three categories: the theological area, our interpersonal relationships, and intrapersonal, how I show up, what I understand, what my self-awareness is. Let's take theology. A lot of comments on our survey about the theological area. 87% of men agree or strongly agree that their theology shapes their thinking about women leading in ministry. But only 21% of men agree that there are resources available to help them to navigate how to lead well with women. We've got frameworks in place. Keith already has a class, Intro to Christian Theology, where he addresses this issue. We can build on these things through IBS, through core training, through building powerful ministry teams. Our third solution category is to connect the network. This has to do with access and development opportunities for women. Organizing a women's mentoring network was the #1 solution that we heard from executives and from all our staff overall that would give access to development and exposure to leaders that currently doesn't exist. Of the 7 ideas presented to female staff that would most contribute to Crew's leadership culture for women, a mentoring network was by far the highest priority. We believe the structures are in place, the will is there, where we can gather small groups of women, co-led by male and female executives. In fact, we believe to give women exposure to male executives as sponsors and mentors would move the ball far forward. In fact, we heard from Steve about how men can be engaged in this process, not making it just a women's thing. We need more intentional mentoring by men and women. Men and women are best served by being mentored by men and women. Create an environment where it's okay for women to be mentored by men. Our research also indicates that women leaders can feel isolated. This is where our peer groups come in. These would allow women a safe place to process. We believe they would help women be engaged more meaningfully in the mission. Our fourth and final category is to equalize the environment. We look at these areas when we talk about processes and policies, promotions and reviews. We look at these as creating a guardrail for keeping the organization on track and moving in the direction that ensures our values. This is another cultural piece for the Q18 woman to thrive and to lead. We identified 3 processes and policies. In our survey, an open-ended question about policy change, we heard almost 100 people share comments about how Wives' Day contributes to low morale among women. So we're asking our team, our leadership, to consider removing Wives' Day. This quote synthesized the sentiment we heard overall with women and its connection to their leadership in Wives' Day. The unspoken cultural norm is that the men lead and the women are at home. Wives' Day is a reflection of this. Secondly, job flexing. Not job sharing, but job flexing. We believe normalizing job flexing would allow RML couples to have the power to make the decision between themselves, between the spouses, that they may more readily engage in the mission in conversation with their own leadership. Equal opportunities for spouses. This has to do especially with internal transfers. Often we can pay more attention to the man than the woman. We'd like to see a consistent practice of each spouse being given equal opportunity. Finally, we again join with our oneness and diversity colleagues in talking about or leading towards standard promotions and reviews. Review process that is equitable, that is transparent process, and yields the best leaders. Together, we've concluded that these solutions will most directly impact the culture, and in particular, for the women who most want to lead.
We believe Crew must make significant changes within our culture for 2 main reasons. The first, so staff women can flourish, fully contribute to the kingdom using their gifts and strengths. But that isn't enough. Our second reason is so the mission of fulfilling the Great Commission, reaching lost women and men around the world with the gospel of Jesus, can be realized. And for both of these reasons, we must consider the future leadership of Crew. How to retain and steward the Q18 woman. She may serve in small ways, large ways, locally, globally, in campus and city and family life, or any of the ministries connected to the mission of Crew. Today, these questions remain for us as an organization and for you as our leaders. Will we do what it takes, whatever it takes, to fully release the strength of women in leadership? Will we get the best leaders, both men and women, from ethnic backgrounds, from dominant culture, from around our country, working together for the sake of his mission, Will we invite all women to the battle to be warriors against the enemy of this world for a mission far greater than ourselves? And will Crew be known as a Christian organization where women are valued, needed, and flourishing as leaders? Today, we are in a cultural moment that we cannot pass up. We cannot pass up this cultural moment. Student women on campuses around our country, and world for that matter, are wondering, do they have a place in Crew to do kingdom work, to come along with us? Staff women are wondering, who are already with us, do they have advocates from the highest levels of leaders for their leadership and their contribution? For the 54% who desire to strongly lead, but they're also considering leaving, let's become the kind of organization that makes them want to stay. We want to leave you today with a destination postcard. We also read the book Switch, and we made our own little postcard for you. And it's on your table, so grab one. And we have 100 more if you know of other women, or men for that matter, who want to pray with us. But this is a visual reminder of Bill Bright's famous words. I hear there's a pillow in his office with these words on it. The best is yet to come. Take this postcard, leave it on your desk, reminding you to pray with us that Crew will become a new and better place. Because we fully believe that if women are empowered to lead, and the culture within Crew allows them to flourish, the best is yet to come.
To our learning time. My name is Jamie Wagner. I work with Jesus Film Project. One of the things that I saw over the last 6 months is that these are not statistics and recommendations that we're making to you. These represent stories of women all over our ministry. And even in this very room, there are bright spots of women that are leading greatly in the highest levels of our organization. And while they are our bright spots, what I've been learning over the 6 months is that we actually all have our dim spots too. That every woman in leadership probably has stories of the organizational complexities and intricacies that it took to get her into that role, and the stories that have come from being in that role. And that it is through a learner's posture and surrender and serving as we learn to give up control, as we as leaders, as I myself, learn to give what power I have to bring others to the table, that we really get to have God's greatest blessing for us in leadership and for this ministry.
I'm Gabe Handy, and I serve with Jesus Film Project as well. And we all experience Crew culture with different experiences. I think I was pretty ignorant to other people's experiences prior to this project. Taking such a deep dive into the experiences for a significant segment of our staff was eye-opening. How could I be so unaware of a challenge that impacts so many? This deep dive, though, hit home for me something that is taught in the leadership framework. What I learned is the importance of continually cultivating my heart, being consistent, not just when it's convenient. I found for myself that the work of this cultivation is what allows me to hear and see others well, connect with their stories, grow in passion for change, and allow myself to be changed as well. When this work isn't happening, I found complacency starts to take root and empathy begins to wane. Everything we do as a leader flows from the heart.
It was actually 1 year ago today, exactly, that actress Alyssa Milano sent out a tweet asking women to respond, "Me too," if they had experienced sexual harassment or assault. What we've seen over this last year is the power of stories, and particularly of collective stories, in bringing attention to things that need to be addressed. Being part of this team has given me an unprecedented opportunity to look at the collective stories of hundreds of women in Crew, many of whom I will never meet. I feel honored by the trust that I've been given from the organization in being able to take on this project from my team in the way that they've encouraged and responded to where I've taken leadership, and from my sisters on staff as they've shared very vulnerable stories with us. I felt a significant stewardship in that, in seeking to understand and represent both the pain and the hope that exists in their stories. And I've noticed both individually and across the board how powerful and healing it can be to be heard and validated. I have my own stories, and they've been part of this journey too. In the midst of that, in joy and in difficulty and in really processing this holistically, I've also rediscovered a love of complex challenges, greater confidence in my own future as a leader, and a deeper longing for true peace and reconciliation.
There's 3 particular areas of learning for me personally. The topic of women in ministry has been, for most of my life, a topic that I've only had to deal with it at a distance. It wasn't until this Action Learning Challenge that I gained a realistic view of current reality for many women within Cru, along with a greater clarity as it pertains to just broader evangelicalism. I saw that what it really looks like to come together in unity between women and men towards an enormous task, utilizing godly gifts and talents that were on display over a course of a significant period of time. This was an enormous blessing to experience, and it gave me hope for Cru. I am thankful for the honesty, encouragement, and trust given me from our entire team, especially the women. Thank you for teaching me about bravery, about perseverance, about hope. Thank you. And lastly, I would like to just mention a little bit of a renewed, intimate relationship with the leadership framework. And this is most importantly, it did in a long way. I can talk with Mark a little bit later. But most importantly, it has entered into my personal growth in new ways. And not just for personal growth's sake, but more for growth that enables me to lead and serve others better.
Thanks, John. My name is Deb Goodson. I'm a team leader at UC Berkeley. And here's just a warning. I'm going to get a little vulnerable. Invisible electric fences are meant to teach boundary lines. After that first good shock, only a few more reminders are needed before the fear of the next sting prevents further exploration. While I have loved the opportunities I've had to serve and lead with Cru, my experience as a woman in leadership has also come with great pain. A couple good shocks, but many numbing reminders, has left me filled with fear and self-doubt. But God, being rich in mercy, is writing a new story. In his goodness, grace, and honestly humor, I had the chance to work on this project and with this amazing team. And through this experience, qualities about myself that I had learned over the years to be shameful liabilities. Things like that I'm a woman gifted in leadership, that I'm a bicultural woman of color, that I'm a Christian working mother, that I'm a strategic thinker and question asker, and that I'm a strong and fierce activist at heart. I'm beginning to see them instead as being gifts from God rather than liabilities. I've learned I want to courageously lean into how God has made me as a woman, and giving a voice to the voiceless, those like me, and playing my small but significant role in the kingdom to usher in God's kingdom on here on earth.
God is so kind, isn't he? The fact that I get to do this, be here with this team and partake in this, it's just an evidence of his kindness. When I think about 2 words about my learning, I think about courage and I think about fierceness. This team has called me to be courageous when I felt incompetent, when I was incompetent, to step in, to not shrink back, to not edit, to count myself in. That was a huge gift, and it's been a big deal for me in my leadership journey already. Secondly, fierceness. The women that we talk to about their stories, their bravery, they're willing to step in and to be courageous. And in particular, Deb and Claire and Jamie, your work, being able to work with you, has been both compelling and challenging, and I'm grateful for that.
off, thanks Dee Dee for the time reminder. We're going to move into a time of Q&A, and we would love to hear what questions we can help answer for you.
All right. Wow, I see a hand back there.
Great job, you guys. Really inspiring. One of the complexities I've dealt with on staff is as you move into a leadership position with a male counterpart who has a wife who we're also trying to empower, to lead, that has created a lot of, I don't know, problems? So, friction. What are some of the things you've learned about that? How can we help navigate that as we help empower all women?
Yes, we discovered that as well. I think part of it is that women, from a woman's perspective who's holding the leadership weight and responsibility, there's a social mix, or there's a bind in a sense that there is this thing to navigate. And so I think as we think about building out some of the healthy frameworks for men and women to work together, that would be one of the issues potentially that we could address through that solution. There are many specifics of that, but I do think that is a significant one that did come up in our research. So that's probably where we would seek to address it.
Yes, I think that is a interesting but awesome complexity we have in our organization because families and couples are valued on staff. And I actually had the opportunity to experience that firsthand for the first time this past summer. My husband led the Ocean City Summer Mission, of which I led last year, but this year I was just his spouse. And it was a very difficult, actually, learning experience, and one where I wanted to platform the woman who was entrusted to the weight of leadership and to that role, as well as share and give and serve appropriately. And it is incredibly difficult, and I think it's incredibly difficult for both. Actually, for my husband, for me, and for the woman who was leading, right? So it's kind of a triad. And yet, I think there's great hope of how it can be done as we lean into each other, as we share vulnerably, as we understand that authority and leadership is not about power, of which I think often we get confused in that, but it's about letting go of power and letting go of authority so we can platform and allow others to flourish.
And if you haven't seen our proposal, it's very large. And part of that is that it dives into some of these solutions. How do we create healthy team environments among men and women where we can be working together to flourish?
So one of the things I would say is, one of the elephants in the room is because we are a Christian organization, and I know that many men and women all struggle with women leading. They talk about the Titus 2 woman, a woman is to be silent and all that. Have you all thought through how do we address these type issues as people are struggling in these issues? How do we address them so that we can, move forward and allow women to lead?
Yes, that's written out in one of our solutions as well that I'll give to John to elaborate on.
Yes, we are a Christian organization, and so theology does play a part. And so our hope is, and thoughts behind that, is that this would get worked out over a significant period of time. One of the areas that we thought would be best would be an IBS course. This is, I know this might seem a little bit strange just to offer a course as a solution, but it's really built around three parts. We would say a theological, an interpersonal, and then an intrapersonal. And so it's structured that really moves you from understanding, and let's have some dialogue, biblical understanding of God's view of men and women in ministry together. What we would move into is some of that unconscious bias or just internal background, a lot of what we would mirror even in what the Lenses Institute has done with See, Understand, Act. And so that component of just understanding where you're at. And then how that practically gets played out. And so the proposal was maybe a course that was structured in that three-part, and that last portion is the practical applications. Like, how does this really look within our ministry at Crew, the structure that we have, the realities that we have, and how can we begin to dialogue about these rather than just to kind of ignore those particular components?
I think one of the other things on that topic is that we really wanted to avoid the binary trap that a lot it seems like that conversation tends to fall into, like either you're on this side or this side. And what we actually spent some time researching is actually the breadth of nuance of how some of these different, it's more of a spectrum than a polarized, but we need to be careful in the way that we approach it because we don't want to create that divisiveness. And so what we need is a more holistic approach to say, how do we engage in these kinds of conversations? How do we come to our own theological conclusions about this that takes a more comprehensive, holistic approach to it rather than only kind of saying this or this. And we actually found that as a request from our staff, that they're wanting that. They're like, please, like we need to know how to engage these topics biblically. So we recognize that as a need.
Thank you for an excellent, compelling, convincing, and powerful presentation.
Thanks,
It
Tom.
really reflected that. I'm married to a Q18 woman, and I have 5 Q18 daughters. So this is a great concern
That
to
says a
me.
lot about you.
I'll take that as a compliment.
It is.
I take everything as a compliment. I'm looking forward to reading the research, but are any of the action points related to cross-generational? So my wife is in the higher levels of, I'm not going to say how old she is, but has raised children for 24 years and was in a previous crew culture where Wives' Day was esteemed, where she gets a invitation through Google Calendar for the first time in 24 years and thought it was a mistake. Yes, she's a Q18 woman. So what are the opportunities for our older staff that are the Q18, and then what are the opportunities for, I have 2 in college involved with crew, 1 a recent grad. How are we addressing this even in the culture of student culture, and what are the opportunities? And does your report reflect that?
Yeah, so I think there were 2 questions in there, and I'll take a stab and feel free to add. For the first one, as you saw from our statistics, 1 in 3 of our women were over the age of 40. So this is a very pressing complication in a way of when you think about the amount of staff, even hearing that 20% of our staff are over the age of 60 and yet are desiring to engage in the place. And that is really, when we're talking about mentoring networks, women's groups, those are not based on age. They are based on how do we develop women wherever they're coming in and see them in a pipeline that continues to help them be qualified to accept new roles of responsibility as they desire. For young women, we actually had 1 student focus group on a summer project, and even just as we surveyed, obviously 1,200 staff, and many of them have direct correlations to students, and as in the student ministry, we saw that there was a significant ratio of younger women that considered not coming on staff because they didn't see a future for them. And all of the women in our Ocean, our summer project focus group, actually said, I don't see how I would lead within crew. So when we think that our younger student women aren't noticing a culture and how older staff are treated, specifically women, we're lying to ourselves because they notice and they want to make a difference and they want to come on staff and be a part of our missional culture. And it is our job as leaders to platform them and make a pathway for them to do that.
I think one thing that we would love to see change is that crew as an organization would not make assumptions and decisions for women. And I think often it is assumed that women don't want to lead or that they wouldn't give up a time, an hour, 20, 40, whatever it might be, at any age, particularly once you bear a child. And so I think we have to have a really big deep dive into what does it look like to platform and encourage women to be empowered to make decisions for themselves. Because many women actually are Q18 women and they want to lead. And many other places, certainly secular places, give women an opportunity to do that. But my hope is that people wouldn't leave to go to secular workplace work. While that's valid, my hope is that these Q18 women would stay doing full-time work engaged in the mission.
Hi, my name is Audrey Castro, and I work at Family Life. I am a full-time working mom with 2 toddlers, and so great job. I really appreciate the work that you did. But my question is centered on one of the things I feel like we deal with at Family Life is the tension between RO wives and paid wives. And so I'm curious to know if you did any exploring around that, just the tensions there. I'm trying to understand each other. How many of the women surveyed were RO versus paid? And how do you recommend we move forward in encouraging each other and empowering each other in our respective roles and how we're serving, whether that's in the home or in the workplace?
Thanks, that's a really great question. And one of the things that we kind of got overwhelmed by was the level of complexity that we're dealing with, because there are so many different variables that affect how women experience their time in crew, and that what you're raising is a really big one. I think we had about 15% overall of the people who took the survey were paid staff. And ultimately, we had to get to the point where we're like, we recognize probably at least 3 or 4 additional SLI action learning projects that could come out of this. You know, I think that particular, and the way that those values are lived out, for me, one of the most surprising and kind of really devastating things was learning that our paid staff women don't have any maternity leave. And that's actually, somebody has begun to, any paid maternity leave. If they want to take off time to have a child, they have to use their vacation time or they don't get paid. That was shocking to me. You know, and so there's, it doesn't consistently represent the value that we have as an organization on family. So like that's one thing, and we didn't tackle that as part of our solution because we just recognized that it was so big. I mean, other things include, you know, the specific needs of singles. That could be its whole other action learning project. Difference in cultural norms between the ethnicity and how that informs our views of what the appropriate role of women are. I mean, there are so many different spin-off projects that we could do, and we ultimately just had to say we can't possibly tackle all of those. But I would really love if maybe a future SLI or further work was to be done on that. It just was kind of beyond the scope of what we could kind of get into.
And we're actually, is there one more question? Oh, we'll take one more question and then we'll transition.
So as you think about creating a flourishing culture for women on our staff, what behavior changes would need to be modeled at all levels of the organization for that to become real?
This is really, again, a multifaceted solution to this problem. And so I think us trying to speak to, we realize 4 solutions, and really there's 2 phases to each is a lot. But again, the complexity of it, we thought if we can come at it from maybe some short, quick wins of what the message is beginning to communicate through some of the policies that we have, then we have this mentoring network that begins to build up and establish a community for women to really feel engaged and believed in and honored. And then the theological IBS, we had even proposed that that would be just an initial course, but we even envisioned it being at new staff training. So from the very beginning to help our new staff understand how to begin to relate with men and women in ministry and beginning to kind of go through that. And so we know that it's not necessarily just a direct solution. It's going to take time, and we're trying to approach it from a few different angles, knowing that, again, it's not just one. It's creating a culture, it's having information and resources that affirm and speak to that. It becomes a part of the culture through time as we educate and learn and experience. And so it's, again, a long-winded answer to that, but I think it just, again, points to some of the depth of the change that we're trying to really display and the complexity of the topic.
I think one thing that we did recommend that the Oneness and Diversity team did as well is unconscious bias training. And it has to do with ethnic diversity and minority, but also gender. And if you look at reports, there's actually many this year because of the Me Too movement in the secular workplace, is that because of discrimination lawsuits and clauses and various initiatives in secular workplace, unconscious bias training, diversity training, if you will, anti-discrimination is very, very big. I think within crew, we don't want to use those words. We want to use unconscious bias, but we want to say it in a way that, how do you break out of stereotypes that maybe one has had for decades on end? And how do you look at somebody, whether that they're from an ethnic minority background and communicate differently, believe different things, have various values, or for women who don't fit the feminine mold of what society says. 2 books that we've read, I don't know how you guys appreciate Brene Brown, but we appreciated some of her work on shame and what that looks like for men and women and how that can impact behavioral change, as well as Andy Crouch, who mentioned Strong and Weak, his whole diagram, his 2x2 grid about authority and vulnerability. And I think with unconscious bias training alongside some of these really built out secular but also Christian frameworks, I think behavioral change at the very core of our heart is what's necessary. And time, it'll take time, but in time, I think it's very, very possible.
And I would say we heard from one leader that this is not a women's problem, but it's a man's problem. And just as we've talked about engaging and training and opening up conversation for things like the Billy Graham rule, I'm a guy who probably has pretty high boundaries when it comes to working with women. Well, how do I engage in that? How do we have healthy conversation? How do we have a safe place to be able to process and be able to work well together? As I've learned, I've unwittingly, unconsciously had biases where I didn't allow women to lead in the ways that God was calling them to lead. So I think we need to establish, whether it be at IBS, in our core doctrine, or whatever, open up avenues to have those conversations, particularly for me, for us as guys, to be able to navigate and negotiate this better.
Thanks. And again, in our proposal, we talk about the threefold solutions that would need to happen at every level of the theological, of making sure we're embracing our big tent mentality, our interpersonal, how men and women have flourishing relationships, working together and leading together, and intrapersonal, the ways that we have our own biases and respond to people of opposite genders or ethnicities. And so we would see all 3 of those changes desired at every level of the organization. We've been working on this project for 6 months, sometimes equally problem solving, coaching one another, counseling one another, and it has been weighty. It is weighty to bear the men and women's stories as they genuinely desire to lead together well and are trying to figure that out. And so we wanted to take just a few moments, if anybody had comments, or as they're kind of hearing this for the first time, if anything comes to mind, we just wanted to have a few minutes, probably 2. And if anybody felt like they had a comment versus a question they wanted to express.
Okay, do it loud. Okay, don't do it loud.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for doing the work. I think you've studied it so well that I think multiple times there was tears in my eyes because you expressed so well the struggle. And I also want to thank you because you were hopeful. You encouraged us how we can platform for the future together that God has called us to. So thank you.
All right, so thank you for all the research that you did. It was obvious that you did a lot of research. I will just leave you with one thought. As we remove, or as you recommend to remove the Wives' Day, let's just make sure that we find a way to continue to honor those women who are not Q18 women.
Thanks, Joyce.
Okay. I think time-wise, do we have more time, Dee, or do we need to? 1 minute appreciation feedback, really, okay. And then the sponsors.
I didn't want to not have the sponsors thank. I thought, well, anyway, everybody's getting kind of hungry, and you can say more about. But here's the deal. So Carol Donnelly was one of our sponsors from LDHR. Tom Miner from Jesus Film, and myself, Jacqueline Kellum from Jesus Film, were sponsoring this group. And I just wanted to, and I just lost it, as a woman leader, this is to you guys, I want to thank you for your willingness to take on this topic and for doing the tremendous amount of work you did with the difficult things you uncovered. And as we can see, it's incredibly valuable. You willingly took on a complex and rather volatile topic. However, you forged ahead because you saw the weight of the issue at hand. And all of you chose to lean in and learn from the reams of research, interviews, surveys, and over 3,000 comments that came in from the survey. You cried because you saw that pain had been inflicted, but remained professional, compiling the data. I think your spouses saw positive growth and change in some of you. And each of you were vulnerable with one another and with us as sponsors through the process, and I want to thank you for that. We watched you grow together as a team, respect each other, share tasks, and work through difficult challenges. You saw the true value of prayer also by supplying regular prayer requests to bring before the throne of grace. This kind of issue needs to be bathed in prayer, because this sort of change is something the enemy doesn't want to happen. And so bringing your requests to God was important and valid, and I think it's something we're going to have to continue bathing in prayer. And us as sponsors believe that Cru will, in the next few years, become a place where women can be empowered and developed in greater ways because of the cultural changes proposed today, and because of the many willing and ready to implement those changes.
Jacqueline and Carol, you guys were amazing. And to the 4 women's group in the back that also championed us. And our coaches, oh my gosh, what would we do without Rhett and Bonnie, who were like basically an equal part of the project. And Kayla. Where's Kayla? Kayla was a volunteer who came on our team.
Great, thank you guys, great job. Okay, good. You'll see on your table, there's action learning outcomes. If anyone wants to look at that over lunch, you're welcome to. It kind of gives you a more full picture of more than I shared this morning. Also, lunch is ready, and it's in this hallway out here. You just go by and get your lunch, and there's a room right next door behind this wall that has tables set up for you to eat lunch at. And then last thing, the next presentation starts at 1:30, so be in the room before 1:30 so you can catch the beginning of it. Thanks.